Appamada's programs and facilities are supported through your generosity. Thank you for your support. There is a Donna box for contributions in the kitchen and also a link for contributions on the website.
Good morning.
Good morning.
It's good to be with all of you. Well, I'm going to offer a talk as a preview on grace, which is another weird word we don't really use in Zen. So you might think of this as a compliment to the talk I gave on sin and repentance a couple weeks ago. And I think I'm perhaps kind of intrigued or preoccupied with this because I'm feeling a deep need in this moment to kind of reconcile my spiritual roots with this path before us in Zen and before me in particular in Zen. And maybe because of the particular political moment we're in, which is being animated by people who ostensibly point to Christian theology as a sort of source for their actions, I'm troubled by what I see, and it feels unfamiliar to me based on what I lived and experienced as a young person. So grace felt like an important thing to explore in some way, shape, or form. And so that's where this comes from. And I can credit my dad with part of the talk because my dad is a pastor, master's in church history. And I'd written up something yesterday and I was at Parker's soccer game and I said, okay, I'm giving a talk on grace. Who did I miss? Who should I go to? He goes, oh, Augustine. I'm like, right. He's like, so you want to go really far back, go back to Augustine. So Augustine makes an appearance courtesy of my dad. So my dad co-authored this Dharma talk today. And I've got some things written here and I've made the font large enough that hopefully I won't need the glasses, but forgive me if I'm scrolling a little bit. So when Buddhists hear the word grace, we often think of like a favor handed down from on high. That's not really our particular grammar. It's not the way we speak about things. Yet we know the felt sense the word points to, something unearned, it's unsummoned and profoundly healing. So Christianity tends to begin grace with God's action. Zen tends to end grace in attunement to what already is. So I kind of think of these as the same weather systems, different barometers, if you will. But I want to kind of hold both ends of that hinge. So the Christian claim is that grace is a gift, not a wage, and the Zen claim that awakening is realized, not acquired. So I'll lean into several different voices to explore this. So St. Paul, a little bit, Augustine, and Richard Rohr. And I'm Richard Rohr in particular because I'm convinced that if Dogen were to be reincarnated as a Benedictine monk, he would show up as Richard Rohr. So I think you'll enjoy some of what he has to say. But I'll start with sort of the baseline for the Christian grammar. And the reason I'm going there is because I think we're inundated with this language. As I said before, sin and repentance, kind of our culture is steeped in these ideas, even if it wasn't our particular spiritual upbringing. So grace is also there. Christians mean something quite definite by grace. So an unmerited gift, or charis. It's not a reward, not a wage. It's a gift that creates the very capacity to receive it. So a couple of bits by Paul, who writes famously about this in the New Testament. It's by grace you've been saved. It is the gift of God, not by words. So the engine is the gift, not effort. Effort responds, it doesn't initiate. At another point in Corinthians, he writes, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Meaning the aperture isn't strength, but surrendered places. The wound is the window. You can think of it that way. That feels really different than the political kind of rhetoric that's around right now, but it's right there beside other things that are being quoted. So if I want to compress the kind of Christian view, and this is my take, right? Others have many other takes. So initiative, God moves first. It's unmerited. Nothing you do earns it. And I'm going to come back to that idea. And the dynamic is grace doesn't just pardon, it transforms you. It works through you. And it's mediated. It comes through word, sacrament, community, and encounter. Very human stuff. It's not entirely mystical, though there is a mysterious element to it. And it's relational. It presumes a giver and receiver. So a creator and a creature in this case. So this is a place where we can pivot. So if Zen asks, what is the field in which gift is always already happening? You might think about that. St. Augustine writes about kind of the melting of this hard self in a really interesting way. So I'm going to pull from some of his works on confessions from the 5th century. So a couple of little things that really stood out to me. This idea of melting, what I would describe as melting instead of muscling through as an orientation. To your grace I attribute it. You have melted away my sin as it were ice, he writes. So it's not conquered, it's melted, like heat applied to frost, effort at the right remove. So posture that receives is also part of this stance, as you resist the proud but give grace to the humble. So humility here isn't sort of self-abasement, it's more like an emptied bowl. Pride is simply the refusal to be a bowl. Pride is the refusal to receive and contain that which is available. And then the last piece that he talks about is this discovery, this notion of discovery. Late have I loved you. You were then and I was without you. You called and shattered my deafness. You blazed and dispelled my blindness. So grace doesn't arrive from far away. It unveils what was there all along. The shock is not distance closed, but at nearness recognized. And so these orientations from Augustine were helpful to me because they were reframing this language that I'd heard so much as a kid in ways that I could sort of process these inside-out dynamics that we're constantly navigating in Zen and collapsing. Richard Rohr speaks often about grace, and if you've read any of his stuff, he's got a wonderful email that he sends out on a regular clip, a little less so now. It's just phenomenal. But one piece that he writes is, grace is not something God gives us. Grace is who God is. Grace is God's official job description. The only prerequisite for receiving the next grace is having received the previous one. Every moment is not obvious as God, as grace. It looks quite simply like another ordinary moment. But our willingness to recognize it as gratuitous, as a free gift, as self-revelatory, as a possibility, allows it to be that way. So he writes about how the ordinary moment becomes the locus of the gift. And this really seems to resonate really strongly with our practice and its emphasis on our emphasis on ordinary sitting, breath, moment by moment presence. So in other words, grace isn't a product that's dispensed, it's a field that we're already bathing in. He talks a lot about so many wonderful things. He has this image that I'm going to come back to later. He says, where it pools, like water, grace seeks the lowest place, and there it pools up. The image is physical. Water doesn't argue, it descends. Where we come down from our height, our status, our certainty, our performance, that's where grace gathers. And again, that felt like a nourishing place to reside. So the holy shifts here from that which can be controlled to lived. And it becomes a kind of mature mysticism in the way that Rohr thinks about this. He says, we must honor the infinite mystery of our own life's journey to recognize the divine in it or God in it. Or is it the other way around? All I know is for sure that I am born in merely a small part of a much greater birth. We did not earn or find God or the divine. We just get ourselves in the way. We let go of illusion and the preoccupations of the false self. This is where it really smacks of Dogen, right? This idea of a kind of possibility of enlightenment, the field itself is supportive, and it's our great task is to let go of our own illusions that are clouding what's happening. So I think there is a kind of unspoken grace that radiates in Zen, and for that I'll turn to Dogen. So I'd say that Zen's horizon of grace is, again, that it's realized, not bestowed. So there's no giver, no giving, no receiver. It's just recognized. So Zen is kind of, you can think of our practice as being expert in the moment after you stop bargaining with reality. What happens when you stop trying to bargain with it? Once there's no one left to impress or persuade, the whole world tastes different. Like water when you notice you're thirsty. So a few lines from Dogen, of course, from Genjo Koan: to study the Buddha way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to be actualized by myriad things, or the 10,000 things in the traditional translation. So you can think of that as where there's some kinship there between what Dogen's saying and Aurora's saying of the water seeking the low places. When self-concern loosens, reality does the practice for us. Some of you may remember the stern reprimand, I think either maybe Blanche got from Suzuki about, I sat and I counted all my breaths for the entire period of Zazen. I did Zazen, and he got very stern and said, you do not do Zazen, Zazen does Zazen, right? That idea of when the self-concern loosens, reality does the practice for us. A couple other pieces from Bendoa. Buddhas in the Buddha way do not wait for enlightenment. So there's no waiting for a later mercy. The gift is contemporaneous with sitting. It's right there, here and now, available moment by moment. And that relates again to his concepts on Uji, being time. So every moment is all moments. Nothing is missing from now. If time itself is generous, each moment is complete, what exactly would we be waiting for the future to give us? We're already steeped in a kind of grace. So we might say that if Zen can use the word grace honestly, if it means the spontaneous generosity of thusness once the self-center loosens. So that which arises when we let go of that self-centered dream, as we're going to chant in a little bit. I was looking for other Zen thinkers who'd written or talked about grace in any particular way. Norman Fisher does. So he writes this meal prayer for the Zen Hospice Project. And he says, as we make ready to eat this food, we remember with gratitude the many people, tools, animals, plants, air, water, sky, and earth, turned in the wheel of living and dying, whose joyful exertion provides our sustenance this day. This to me is a kind of perfect embodiment of what Zen grace might be. It's not a metaphysical transaction, but an act of attention that reveals the inherent gift structure of the ordinary, everything that's already there and being offered. And so Fisher's other point is that ritual is not performance, it's acknowledgement of what already is. And we can see this in Suzuki Roshi's Beginner's Mind. In Beginner's Mind, there are many possibilities. In the Experts, there are few. So this again feels like Rohr's lowest place. It feels like Augustine's humility without the bruise. It's the mind that can be given to because it isn't already full. So I kind of went through and made this little table, which I'm not sure I'm going to read all of it to you, but I was trying to go, okay, so here's how the Christian folks think about things. Here the Zen thinks, and what are the things in common? And that's the thing I'm feeling so starved for. Maybe because I want to have more conversations like this with my own parents. Maybe because I see things happening in the world that are so messy and I just want to find common ground. But here are a couple things. So the source of grace, in the Christian articulation, it's God's initiative. In the Zen articulation, it's the generosity of thusness or suchness, this right now. What they share is that the real is benevolent, in effect. There's another piece here of like, what's the mechanism? How does it move? In the Christian articulation, it's bestowed and received. In the Zen articulation, it's realized and recognized, but in either place, the self is not the author. We can loosen that dream of self in either occasion. We might think of the gestures that we use. In the Christian articulation, the gestures are surrender, trust, word, and sacrament. In Zen, we articulate it as letting be or not knowing. But there's a posture of yielding over managing and control. It's a posture of surrender in both places. Maybe one more. I was thinking, what's the affect of it? What does it kind of feel like in each tradition? In the Christian articulation, there's an attitude of gratitude and awe that comes with grace. That's the natural response. In the Zen articulation, equanimity and wonder might be our responses. It's a kind of thank you without a particular addressee needed in either one. So I was imagining that Augustine and Dogen were talking across the centuries, and you could kind of see some of those things where Augustine is saying, you were within and I was without. And I heard Dogen just kind of koan style going, to study the self is to forget the self. And they're just riffing back and forth. So they're both pointing to the sort of humiliation of control and the joy that follows when you stop trying to control every damn thing. Paul and Suzuki, maybe. So St. Paul says, my power is made perfect in weakness. Suzuki Roshi says, let things come and go and you will be free. Again, not the same sort of metaphysics, but it might be the same muscle group. Meaning, the place where you refuse to be weak is the place you refuse to receive. Roar, you could say, grace seeks the lowest place. Norman Fisher, as we make ready to eat this food, we remember. So the lowest place is not the humiliation, it's birth. It's right here. It's being attuned to what's already present and available to us. So I thought there might be a couple ways that we could practice with this. And these are kind of three ways you could think of practicing grace without a particular giver. So here's the first one. Breath as given. The breath arrives on time. You didn't schedule it. You can't stockpile it. And it will leave when it leaves. Sorry to tell you. If you want a daily practice of grace that needs no theology, notice one out breath all the way to the end. Do nothing extra. Feel the room hold you at the bottom. That holding is what Christians mean by underneath are the everlasting arms. In Zen, it's simply how the body world works. But we can work with the breath as given as a particular practice. A second possibility, and some folks are taking the precepts class right now, so I thought this might resonate. You can experience the precepts as an expression, not an audition. In a merit imagination, ethical life auditions for belonging. In a gift imagination, ethical life expresses belonging. The precepts are the shape gratitude takes when it grows legs. Augustine would say grace perfects nature. Dogen would say practice expresses realization. Again, same shape, different grammar. So as you work with the precepts, can they just be an expression of that? And last, you might think of ritual as an acknowledgement. So lighting a stick of incense, not to manipulate the cosmos in any way or to summon anything, but just to perfume your attention. Vow not to make points, but to lower your center of gravity. Chant not to send words upward, but to tune the room to one pitch. These are not bargains. They are ways the body remembers the field it lives in. Those might be three places that we can tinker a little bit in our particular practice. And I was trying to, at one point I was playing with Amazing Grace and trying to do a Zen version of it. Just did it. It was so weird I couldn't do it. So, but where I did land on the other side, I might try again at some point, but it fell flat. I liked this kind of thing that I ended up stumbling on, which is sit as one already forgiven, breathe as one already sustained, bow as one already arrived. And those might be ways of kind of practicing with this idea of grace in action. So we'll pause there and see what questions, responses, thoughts do you have as we tinker with grace.
One more time.
Yeah, sure. Sit as one already forgiven, breathe as one already sustained, bow as one already arrived. Probably enough words for now, but what do you got? Responses, questions, things you're thinking about? Oh, the doodad.
Yeah, the little button. I'm very struck by the idea that grace has the flavor of beneficence, always of beneficence, and grace being thusness, being equal to thusness. And my idea has always been that Zen is upright.
Mm.
It's neither beneficent nor malevolent.
Mm.
It is upright. It is this. That includes the relative and the absolute. That includes our self and our non-self. And in my experience, there are moments of beneficence, but there are moments of malevolence. So for me to think that thusness or grace is beneficence seems dualistic, seems to set it in opposition, seems to say it should all be good. We should feel beneficent. This is how reality is. Instead of saying it's everything.
That's a challenge. Were you reading the Five Ranks stuff too right now? Yeah, so this is up for me because I'm reading that as well. I don't have an easy response to that one. It's one I'm still wrestling with a little bit myself. I think we say in the robe chant, right? A formless field of benefaction. So we're residing in that space. And so that feels like the koan you live into. What does it look like to reside in that and recognize that the relative good and bad, the beneficence and malevolence arise in our experience as well? That feels like a koan worth exploring.
We have Joan online.
Joan, yeah.
Joan disappeared.
Oh.
One moment. Where did Joan go? Hello, Joan. Wait. There you are. I'm asking you to unmute. Can you see anything on your screen?
Yeah, I can.
There you go.
Oh, there you are. I can hear
Okay,
you.
I kept trying. Well, it's interesting when I heard you say sit as one already, and I'd say enlightened, breathe as one already sustained, bow as one already arrived. It reminded me of the Bodhisattva vow. It seemed like a great aspiration and hard to embody, but a wonderful way, a wonderful orientation.
Hmm. Yeah, maybe that's enough, that it
Yeah,
just orients.
yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Genevieve, I think your hand's there.
It is. Am I
Yeah,
unmuted? Okay.
you're good.
Thank you, Nate. This is very deep, and I just wanted to mention that when I was, and please correct me if I have the wrong end of the stick, but when I was exploring contemplative Christianity, I was taught that the original Aramaic word for prayer meant to open oneself to God, which is basically to meditate, is to be the bowl, and not to know and not to talk and not to ask, but just to be open. And I was also taught that that originally the word sin was an archery term that simply meant you didn't hit the mark this time, which to me is very consonant with how we learn and teach the precepts at Apamata.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'd never heard the first one about being the bowl. That's beautiful. And Nelda, I feel like you mentioned something about sin last time, about missing the mark. So I've heard that now several times. That's lovely. And to find that sort of resonance there.
Well, trying to put this together with yesterday, which I had a very traumatic experience.
Oh no.
Being at the protest and seeing hate, trying to eradicate hate. And there was an opportunity where they were asking for someone to come and talk. And so all week long, I got to think, what would I say? And now being at the protest, I'm really interested. What talk would I give, or how could I change things, or how could grace be interjected here, or love, or gratitude, or love? It just seemed all wrong. That we were just trying to put out a fire with fire.
The bigger flame.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I'm just wondering your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I was struck by, I'd started kind of choosing this topic before the No Kings things. And I was kind of curious to see how is it going to go? Meaning, what kind of energy was going to show up? Was it going to be something that just raised the temperature, invited more fire into the equation? Or was it going to be this kind of quieting solidarity, And I didn't know what was going to show up. And I wasn't there yesterday, and it seems like it was varied by location or by each, I think people I've talked to around the country had different experiences of it. So it's interesting that was yours. It felt like there was just a raising of the temperature, whereas in other places, I think there was a sort of sense of, no, there's quiet solidarity here. If anything, it's kind of a watering down, but the sense that the water is everywhere and pervasive.
It was certainly led by the people who were speaking.
Yeah.
And also, probably other people there might have had a completely different experience, of course.
Yeah. Oh,
okay.
I had a completely
good
experience. I mean,
it's a speaker. Yeah.
Yeah. I just had quite the opposite. To start with, on arriving at the march, going in, and it was kind of off-putting with all the all the truth. But then it was interesting that as I was watching people file, waiting in line to get through and so forth, there were a couple of guys one guy who had a backpack and he had a baseball bat in the back. And I thought, this is not good.
Yeah.
I mean, these guys are up to no good. So there were two of them, and they kept they were thinking about trying to get in where all the rangers were, and then they moved on to try to find an empty space. And I never saw them after that. But somebody mentioned it to one of the guards, and I also And I said, well, yeah, but they wandered off. And the guy said, well, they're not going to be able to get in because they've got people at every
No.
entrance. So
Okay.
anyway, the point is that, what is the point? The point is that I said something about the guy, and I also said, well, that's not what this is about at all. And he said, absolutely not. This is for you guys for people to express themselves freely. And so, here is the armed guy, which to me, I find, and I feel kind of fearful around them. And yet he was taking the right stance. And I saw that all over the place. There was nobody acting violent. So I felt very much in solidarity and very chilled.
Yeah, there are some who are in uniform who are actively there to, like, I'm protecting your right to express
That's
this and
exactly
make
what they
sure that
said.
I am creating a container here in a certain kind of way.
Yeah.
And I
he
know
said
some
that.
people express that, though that's not always the experience,
That's right.
right? And so and this is what's so challenging about this moment. I feel like that for me, the invitation is one. So what does grace look like in a moment like this? What does it look like? What does it look like to meet this and extend compassionate care to someone who holds views I find reprehensible?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a hard one.
Because if we don't, we're just going to keep escalating. Okay, Rosemarie and Manuel, it's like,
I thank you so much, Nate. So I was at the No Kings rally near me in Teaneck, New Jersey, and there was from friends who were in other places, and there was a concerted effort to use the word love. I love America on the signs. So I think there was an awareness of not wanting to go that hate with hate route. And in terms of loud, there was a lot of dump Trump, chanting, and it was loud because we were on the street and meaning for cars to beep their agreement, and it was very loud and so lovely. It was the music to my ears. But Nate, I wanted to thank you for the emphasis on the receptivity of grace, because as you mentioned, the Blanche Hartman example with being so, what she did in Zazen and Suzuki Roshi correcting her. I can always think, well, what am I doing to be in a state of grace? I think that's something that I grew up with too, being Catholic, state of grace. And I was thinking of, being in a state of forgiveness, like that would be, so I really appreciate the shift, the other way to, it's there for us to receive. So thank you for that shift.
thank you.
Nate, thank you for this talk. A lot of what you said really resonates. Um, I was raised Catholic, and I have a sister who's evangelical Christian, and that's always been a source of unspoken tension in my family. And recently, I have another sister who is struggling with health issues, including dementia. And I was talking to my evangelical sister. I'll use these labels to keep them clear. Um, and she was telling me that my sister was going on about, was fixated on this idea of needing to be forgiven. And my other sister kept telling her, "You're already forgiven," and kept trying to remind her of this idea. Um, and for me, it felt like a breakthrough moment of like connection, despite the theological differences. And I really, hear that in your talk today, and so that's where it resonates. Um, I didn't go to the protest, but I at some point during the talk, I also felt this sense of resistance,
Mm.
because we don't see that harmony in a lot of places. And last night I watched the film Walk With Me that I know the Sangha watched a few months ago. And there's a scene in the film where these Buddhist monks from Thich Nhat Hanh's Plum Village are visiting the US, and they are meditating in public, and a street preacher starts to essentially preach at them. Um, and attacking their beliefs, right? And um so I I appreciate the effort to try to harmonize these beliefs, but I guess I'm wondering, like, what do we do when um this falls apart, right? And where I think we try to be the bowl, or we try to be the water, and then we hang on. Is it that then we try to hang on to that and beat other people over the head with it? Um, and
No.
that's where right, is that where we're going wrong?
Yeah.
And that's where I'm facing resistance.
Okay. That I appreciate that. Probably beating people with your bowl is not a great way to go. You know, so that feels counter to what we're up to. I think the first place for me that as I'm listening to you is to get really curious about things, get curious about other people's view, get curious about what is it that is driving and animating them, and try to find some semblance of common ground or overlap, even if it's not in the obvious places. And I'm saying this like I need to do this with my parents, who are conservative, center right-ish, right, in their views. We're going to come to my talk in November and be very uncomfortable through the whole thing, but very supportive in that. Like this is a daily ongoing challenge for me as well. And what I can tell you is where there has been common ground is when I go, oh, say more about that. And then I go, oh, that's kind of like this. And you find a little bit of an inroad, just like you were describing, like you're already forgiven. It's just this little moment of connection where the energy gets to dissipate a little bit. I don't know how much more we can do than that, but weaponizing our bowls is probably not helpful.
Thank you.
Last word. Yeah.
Thank you. Couple of things occurred to me here. I think something really interesting with Augustine here is that I think Confessions are one of, if not the first, like major theological work written from the first person, right? Which is really
very
interesting
unique
when you think, right, like about ego and grace and all those sorts of things. So that occurred to me immediately. Yeah, kind of following the conversation where it's been going, I don't have too much trouble with folks not accepting my beliefs directly. I'm not terribly bothered by that. I think where I fall down, where I really struggle is, I have trans friends, immigrant friends who are in really serious, imminent danger. And how do I bring grace in a way that helps that isn't just surrendering to what is because it doesn't affect me as directly?
I think surrendering to what is doesn't mean you don't take action, right? But you're not adding aversion into the mix. Can you take action without adding aversion to the mix? Is that possible? And I say that as one with Hispanic family members, and I have undocumented friends and family. This is, it's not like an abstract thing. So I'm saying that as an inquiry that I'm holding for myself as well. All right. Thank you all very much.